When I was 7 or 8, one day after school, my mother asked me, "Why'd you get a B on that test?" I don't think I answered the question, but I interpreted it for myself. And my interpretation was, I'm not good enough. I guess a B is not good enough. Now, that was not an isolated incident. There were other types of events where I kind of got the message that performance is important and excelling is important. And for me, the best way to perform was academically. And I lived my life for a considerable period of time with this sort of diagnosis that I'm not good enough. This is extremely common. Everybody has a story like this in their life story. I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough, I'm not thin enough, I don't get enough attention, I'm not popular enough. These are stories that are quite common. So what I want to illustrate with that story is how we can take experiences from the past that remain unresolved and park them in the future. Now that's how do you park a story from the past in the future? Well, let me share with you a way of thinking about it. If you have a story about yourself from the past that is a story of inadequacy or a story of I don't measure up, you will spend significant amounts of time trying to persuade yourself and others that you do measure up, that you are adequate. And in my case, I did it by getting 6 degrees, by publishing 400 papers in the literature. And it took me many years to resolve that story of not being good enough. And until you resolve it, it will always live in the future. See, if I'm not good enough and I haven't resolved it, I'm not going to be good enough tomorrow. I'm not going to be good enough next week. So part of becoming an effective leader is to be able to separate what happened from the drama of the story that you create about it. So there are 4 steps, I think, to working through that process of inadequacy. The first is to just recognize that the past doesn't have to dictate the future. I mean, first of all, you were fine. You just interpreted that you weren't good enough. So recognizing that the past doesn't have to drive the future is important. But when you take the past and you park it in the future, it's going to drive the future. Second part of resolution is to separate the facts. There is one fact. My mother asked me a question. I want to separate that from my interpretation, which was, well, I'm not good enough. I'm inadequate. And then the third step in all of this is to recognize the absurdity of a 7-year-old acting like a doctor, if you will, and labeling, in this case me, with a terminal diagnosis of I'm not good enough. Terminal diagnoses are with you forever. And until you resolve, in this case, the inadequacy story, that's going to live in the future. So this takes people a lot of work, and it's very, very important for effective leadership to recognize the disempowering stories that we all have so that we can deal with them. And then finally, after you resolve it, put the past back in the put the future back in the past, so to speak. Then you got to say, well, what's my new narrative going to be? It used to be, I'm not good enough. And the new narrative might be something like, I'm fine the way I am. But whatever that new narrative is, it should be one that acts as a context or a lens through which you can live your life going forward in an empowering way, not a limiting way.